the motor industry at Birmingham Business School. We'll go through the detail and get you to explain the rules in a second, Professor Bailey. But first of all, that warning. Clearly, Andy Palmer, others are lobbying. They want changes from government. They want help from government. Do you think the warning is realistic?
Yes, I do. I think there is a kind of existential threat to the UK car industry. If we don't make batteries at scale in the UK, we won't have a mass car industry. And the rules in the Brexit agreement don't help the UK car industry either. If they can't meet those rules, they'll face a 10% tariff on cars made in the UK and exported to the EU and vice versa. That will put the UK industry at a competitive disadvantage.
Well, let's get some detail then on those rules. This is about the percentage of what you manufacture has to come from within the EU. Is that right? Can you spell it out for us?
Yeah, so basically any trade agreement will have what's called local content rules or rules of origin rules, usually 55% local content to qualify and avoid tariffs. There was a special kind of last-minute deal done in the annex of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, which gave a kind of temporary exception for electric vehicles. It meant lower requirements, only 40% of the components for an EV and 30% for batteries, recognising that a lot of the raw materials and battery components come from Asia. So European, British-based firms struggle to meet rules at the moment. From the beginning of next year, that tightens up. You need much more local content. And from the beginning of 2027, the batteries have to be made in the UK or the EU. Otherwise, the car faces a tariff if it's traded between the two. Car makers have been saying for some time they can't meet those rules as they tighten up, and they're going to potentially be facing tariffs.
If the batteries could come from the EU, it is presumably in the EU's interest to change the rules in order that Britain imports batteries from Europe rather than moving its trade further seas. Or is it possible that the EU simply wants British car manufacturing to move to the other side of the channel?
Well, we're seeing big investment in battery making in the EU, but a lot of support has gone into building these battery gigafactories in the EU through the European Battery Alliance, and the EU has recently relaxed its state aid rules as well, partly as a response to Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. So they're going for this big time. I think in the short term, there is the potential for a relaxation of the rules to give car makers a bit more time to adjust. But who's going to ask for the relaxation? Is it the UK or the EU? Whoever asks for it, the other side will probably want something in return. So, there needs to be, I think, an agreement on this to give the industry more time.
And a final quick one, if you could. We heard a lot, particularly from Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister, about a gigafactory for batteries to be built in Britain. What happened?
Essentially, there's no industrial policy to back that up. A lot of talk about doing this, but you look at the scale of industrial policy support in the US, the EU responding to that, and in China. We don't really have anything like that in the UK, and also high energy prices here deterred investment in this as well.
Professor David Bailey, thanks for joining us.
It's now 14 minutes past 7, and it is a month since the mandatory housing order for birds in England and Wales was lifted.